Welcome to the How to Succeed podcast, the show that helps you get to the top and stay there. This is How to Succeed at Employee Engagement. The following podcast is copyrighted by Sandler Systems, LLC, and protected by U.S. copyright laws. Sandler is the worldwide leader in sales, management, and customer service training. You can subscribe to this podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts and find more information about Sandler at sandler.com. I'm your host, Mike Montague, Director of Community Engagement at Sandler, and my guest this week is Matt Phelan, co-founder and co-CEO at the Happiness Index. We're going to talk with him about how to succeed at employee engagement. Matt, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about employee engagement and the Happiness Index. Why do you think it matters for business owners and managers? And what exactly is it? Maybe defining it.
Yeah, so employee engagement was defined or coined in 1990 by an American at Boston University called Bill Kahn. Bill Kahn, one of the three things that employee engagement was supposed to always measure, one of those three was emotions. But over time, emotions have been taken out of business, and in some areas and some businesses been deemed unprofessional. So sharing your emotions at work can be seen as unprofessional. The Happiness Index is an employee engagement, but intentionally called employee engagement and happiness platform, really to bring back into employee engagement what it was always supposed to be, which Bill Kahn called personal engagement, which was always supposed to be about emotions, but it really lost its track as we tried to over measure things and became this like sort of management tool to kind of like channel people. And in that, we lost some humanity, Mike, and the Happiness Index is about bringing that back and helping your employees thrive at work.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk to you about it today. Those people that know me very well or connected with me on LinkedIn, you can always reach out and just search for Mike Montague, you'll find the right one. But know that I have this side project called Playful Humans, where I've been trying to bring play back into the workforce and help adults play for a living and bring back that humanity side as well. So this is a passion topic for me. And I think it leads right into our success formula here too, because the first one is attitude and what people need to believe in order to be successful and the attitude that they need to bring to their work to be successful. So I guess my first question for you here in the attitude bucket is, what is a common misconception that managers or organizational leaders have that's actually holding them back, especially in this employee engagement area?
It's the phrase, I'm commercial. You hear HR professionals, you hear finance directors, CEOs say it all the time. They say, no, I do like people and I like that stuff that Mike and Matt are talking about, but I'm commercial. And the reason that myth needs to be busted is because the two things work together. The science and the research shows that if you're happier at work, your business and you perform better and you make more money. So you need to flip it round and think, if you don't believe in looking after your people, I would define that as not being commercial. So there's this weird world where I think they say in Star Wars, isn't it, which is only Sith Lords believe in absolutes. And I think that's part of the problem. You don't have to be like, it's not Star Wars. You don't have to be a Jedi or the dark side here. You can believe that it's important to look after your people and make money over here, and the two are connected. And they don't have to be these separate forces that are doing death to the end.
I love that. You're definitely speaking my language. And sidebar, I think they ruined the ending of Star Wars by having the light side win. Spoiler alert. But they could have just said, hey, there is no light and dark side. We all have dark days. We all have light days. We can use both of these for good and evil. And I feel like what you're talking about is the same thing here. How can we be happy and make money? How can we use science and data, but also use our positive emotions and culture to grow our organization? That's a huge first lesson. So let's talk about that of why the happiness of your employees matters so much.
So from a business perspective, the longest study into this area is actually in America on American stock listed companies. And over a 28-year period, companies with happier employees outperformed their competitors. The interesting thing about that research, which is done by Professor Alex Edmonds from London, is that it doesn't change by sector either, Mike. So sometimes people think, oh, maybe if you work in retail, because you see the customers, the flow through into financial performance would be more than, say, someone working in a private equity firm. The flow through is actually the same and consistent from sector to industry. So again, it's why I called my book The Business Case for Happiness, which is this is business 101. This isn't the fluffy stuff. This is actually business critical stuff that I know this is going to sound really harsh to the listeners, but I think if you're not aware of the data and the research, you're ignorant, okay? And I don't mean that in a bad way, just in the definition of it.
Yeah.
As the definition that you are not aware. Ignorance becomes a negative term, but you're just not aware of the data. You have to start questioning CEOs where if they're aware of the data but don't do anything about it, you have to start questioning whether they're incompetent. And I know you've got the happiness guy on, you're thinking, oh my God, he's chucking out all these accusations right now. But it's because I see it every day in the data and I see how it works. So I think it just has to come through the education system. It has to come through how we train people, that treating people is not just a philosophy. It's actually a good business. It's a good way of running a business on all levels.
Yeah, so let's talk about what we can do about it. At Sandler, we inherently preach this too. That people need to believe they're a 10. They need to have confidence and the right attitudes going in. That's why the whole attitude bucket exists there in our success triangles. But the behavior one, I think, is sometimes what people struggle with. They go, well, if we give people freedom to wiggle, they're going to wiggle. If we let them play around, then they might waste time. And I think this is where they get worried. So can you talk to us about how this belief translates into measurable things that you could do to increase your employee engagement, but also their results? Like, what do people need to do in order to make an impact?
Yeah. So let's look at the extremes. We've got a business that's just trying to survive. It's just trying to survive. What we want is businesses that are thriving over here. Now, where those sort of misconceptions come from of, oh, if people are this, they're not going to do anything. It's where things get out of balance, right? So I'll give you the extremes. If people are engaged at work, but not happy, what you get is a competitive work culture where everyone is nice to each other's faces, but they're stabbing each other behind the back. What happens there is that business dies a slow death because everyone is out for themselves. Many of those companies think they have what they think is a high performing culture. What they really have is a competitive culture. On the flip, down here, when we called the happiness index, we actually thought it was all about happiness. But what we also realized is if you have happiness without engagement, you actually have unfocused employees. So when people chuck these things out like, oh, people, blah, 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 it's because it has to all sit in balance in this imaginary box that I've created over here, that you need happiness and engagement. And the way that I would like your listeners to remember the difference, because not everyone works in HR, is that engagement is what your brain needs. Companies have been really good at articulating that rationally for years. What we've lost the ability to do is communicate what the heart needs. And the way I want people to remember this is think of a car, and engagement is all like the sat nav and the direction piece. And the happiness is the fuel that goes in it. You need both. But without the happiness, which brings that energy and the fuel, you're not going to get anywhere. But likewise, if you don't have that sat nav, you're going to be going round in circles and circles. So what you need to do is get them all in balance. And we were wrong ourselves. If we were going to rebrand now, we'd call ourselves the Engagement and Happiness Index, but it's just too many words and we've become known for it, Mike.
No, I get that for sure. Now, I want to talk specifically, though, about the happiness side of things, because I think people do kind of get engagement. They get keeping people busy, or even sometimes flow state and getting people into an ideal work environment. But I don't think they really know what drives happiness. Can you talk about kind of the 4 top drivers that you've seen in your index and survey that you've been doing? Yeah.
So top 4, always underpinned by psychological safety. Your team needs to know out there. I know you guys do a lot of amazing training on sales and things like that. Your team need to know that if they're in that meeting, that big sales pitch, the big final one, and they've got that thing. They have realized that the customer has said this thing, and they know that they do that thing, and they can connect these two bits. Your team, that's that psychological safety when they know Mike's my boss. I'm going to go and I'm going to say that thing that I know is going to connect it, and that will win it. That will win the business. But every now and then it won't work, and I need to know that Mike's not going to fire me because because Mike wants both sides of me. He you can't have that reaching out there and doing that thing that's going to win it without that psychological safety, and that's knowing that Mike's got my back. That's what I think psychological safety in plain terms is. The second one that I want to go to is linked, which is freedom to take opportunities. That's that point when you've got your target market that you're going for, and suddenly you see a new market. So number 2 is freedom to take opportunities. That is the example where someone in your team, you've got your clearly defined market that you're going after, or your clearly defined thing, which is great. But your team member comes to you and they've seen a new opportunity. They've done their research. They've put some homework in. It isn't just they've come in and they think, oh, we should diversify into this. They're coming into you with, they're prepared. They're saying, Mike, look at this. And you have to be able to allow employees, firstly, to make that case. And they will respect you if you say, look, that's something we've got to do next year. But they need that freedom to be heard, and to take that opportunity from time to time. So that freedom to take opportunity, number 2. Number 3, I think, is the most beautiful, human, loving, brilliant one of all, and it's completely free, and you don't need to be Googled to access this, which is feelings of acknowledgement. And it has to be heartfelt, right? Because really what we're talking about here is thank you. This is getting to the end of the week, and you're just calling your team and you're going, I just really appreciate how much everyone went above and beyond for that pitch that we had. Like, I don't want everyone working ridiculous hours all the time, but we did have to pull out those extra few hours in the evening to get it done. Really appreciate it. It's that human bit, completely free. And I always add the word heartfelt, because you could set up an automated email to thank your team every Friday at 3:30. It's not going to work. It's got to be based on that connection piece.
And the big number 1.
Yeah, we're going in with, which is just the most even more beautiful thing, which is positive relationships. It really surprises a lot of people. The second and third and fourth drivers that I'm just talking about, they fluctuate and change in different countries, but the number 1 stays consistent in every single country. And I just think that's amazing, because in the world, there's lots of things to divide us, but to have something that actually brings us all together, positive relationships. So there's loads of research around there about the basics of having a friend at work and all this kind of stuff, but don't get confused with like team building. That is a part of building positive relationships, and there's programs and that kind of stuff, and they're building blocks of this stuff. But it's about having those great relationships at work, and you can't have positive relationships unless you allow people to share their emotions, and that can be negative and positive. So my top tip on that is to not police happiness. So if someone's having a down day, don't be the person, and I've probably been this person in the past, saying, oh, cheer up. You have to ask them why they're feeling down. If they don't want to talk about it, no problems. But quite often people feel better just because you're checking in on them, and they're normally got something going on in their life, private life, that they may or may not share with you. But the fact that you've expressed that you care, and it's okay for everyone and now and then to have a down day, means over time they'll have more up days.
I love what you shared on those 4, because I think there are all 4 things that managers can do that doesn't cost more money. They don't have to go ask for their boss for budget for. You can give them psychological safety. You can protect your team. You can give them freedom to explore opportunities, especially in sales. Take some swings on some deals that we might not win. You know, let's go try something, or to change things up. Try a new pitch and see if it works, and then go from there. We can thank them for their time and effort and show them that we appreciate they're on their team. And we can create a culture on our team or with the people that we surround us with, that it's a positive, happy work environment. We have good relationships with each other and, if need be outside of work too, that we can help them with what they need. That sounds pretty simple to me, but I think what throws it off this will be my last question for you, is I'm interested in the happiness index as a tool, because I've kind of heard people say, you know, what you measure gets managed, or you can manage what you measure and things. And these feel like intangibles. So how do you recommend people look at this, measure it? I don't think you want to measure it, or like you said, make it a checkbox, but maybe time block things or take action on things to make sure you're creating these without trying to micro manage this, because it doesn't seem like something that you could daily check off the to-do list.
So I'll quote the Dunbar number. So the Dunbar number is about 120. It's the people in our social networks that we can keep in touch with. Your core family and friends is about 10, 20 people. Then you might have your next group of friends, another 10. Then you might have your work colleagues, 40. It's why we lose touch with people in life. We don't have the capacity. There are super connectors. I'm getting a sense that you might be one, Mike, who are crazy, and they have higher numbers than 120. But most of us can only establish relationships around 120 people. So if you're running a business of more than 120 people, understanding how all your people feel is going to be incredibly difficult. So the happiness index is effectively emotional intelligence at scale. So it's an engagement platform that you can log in and just understand the top themes about what's making people unhappy, happy, engaged, and unengaged. When you know that, when you're the CEO and you're going into that town hall, the fact that you know what's making people happy and unhappy means your comms and your communications can be so much more emotionally intelligent, which means you're going to get your message through. Because if you know that there's been a serious situation outside of work that is impacting people, the tone that you're going to use in your comms is going to be different. And when you're working on small numbers of people, you just know that. If it's your friend you go and see for a coffee, you know. But when you've got a bigger organization, you don't. And having that data at your fingertips, we say, rather than you can measure it, if you can measure it, you can manage it. This is a much more boring saying, which is, if you can measure it, you can better understand it. If you better understand it, you can make better decisions. And that flows through everything from comms to HR strategy.
I think that's huge, especially with things in HR, that you don't want to make it clear that we're trying to raise our happiness index, because if you do that, people just start lying to you and telling you, oh yeah, it's a 5, even though they're thinking about quitting their job tomorrow. But if you use that information to inform your decisions and make better choices and like you said, craft your communications to the things, you will see people get happier and have less turnover and have higher sales and better results without worrying about what the happiness number is. It's about worrying whether people actually are happy and engaged in their work. So I wanted to take a second and get to know you a little bit better, Matt, and practice what we preach, right? We got to do the relationship part. At this point in your career, how do you define success?
I'll tell you how I used to and how I now do. So my first business, which I built up and sold, it was all about the next goal, the next goal, the next goal, the next goal, the next goal. Never enjoyed it. And by the end was absolutely shattered, absolutely done. Absolutely nothing left to give. The second time round, performance-wise, we're growing AAR, we're doing great numbers. And I measure it by fun, which may surprise people and may to some feel like the most odd, bizarre, non-professional thing. But I literally ask myself, am I having fun and am I enjoying this? And I know that flows through into our numbers because we're enjoying what we do.
Love that. On the flip side of that, was there a biggest hurdle or lesson learned you had to get over in your career in order to be successful?
For me, it was really thinking about strategy, and I'm a really instinctive person, so I'll just follow the energy. And I've had to learn the reflective part to just sit back. It actually came, I know you used to work in radio, Mike. It actually came from a radio show I was listening to, and it was just a Sunday morning call-in of best advice you've ever got from a grandparent. That was the thing. And just someone phoned in, a random, no idea who they are, can't remember them, and they just said the best advice they got from their grandparent was to let things marinate in their brain before making the decision. And it was part of what made me successful was like, right, let's do this, let's move here, blah, 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 really buzzy, blah, blah, blah. And that's still part of my personality, but I now just let things a bit slower. And that was a big, it's funny that it comes from a radio show.
But sometimes the great advice, I think that's a great one.
Yeah.
Just sleeping on it and seeing if you're still as upset or excited about it the next day before you take action is good advice. Do you have a favorite quote, motto, or mantra?
I try and not talk about sport at work because it's an overused, easy route to go down, but I do love sport. So this is personally, I'm just sharing personally for me rather than something I would use in the company. But it's a Michael Jordan quote about turning every negative into a positive. And I have to say, in the pandemic, that little mantra kept me going, because it's just, I'm a relationships person, like I can already tell you are, Mike, and to be locked away and not be able to see people, I found really, really tough. And even, and I know you do a lot of speaking, everything, Mike, like when you do it face to face, you're speaking to, like, I'm speaking to a crowd of 1,000 people. It's a two-way thing where you get energy. When you speak to 1,000 people over a screen, afterwards I have to go and lie down because I've given all the energy out, and you don't get it the same way back. So I love that, because anytime SHIT happens, I think, right, what's the learning? What am I going to take from this? How does this help? So rather than I look at everything as bad, I just look at like, oh, right, there's some great learning here. How do we do it? What happened in the pandemic, I got to write a book called Freedom to Be Happy, The Business Case for Happiness. But that was because I had time, because I couldn't leave my home.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, how can I use this time? So normally I would be going out on the weekends. I couldn't. So I used that time to write a book. So I turned a negative situation into a positive. And that goes around my head at least once a day, because you know what it's like running a business. Stuff goes wrong every day.
I love it. And a great place to land. So last three, we're just going to wrap it up for everybody in a nice big bow based on how to succeed at employee engagement. What's one attitude you would like people to have? You
have to believe that looking after people is the right thing to do. You need to know the research, that it's a business case behind it, but you have to come with that belief. Otherwise, that all the stats and everything in the world won't convince you.
One behavior or thing you would like people to do?
Look out for their colleagues and actually ask them how they're feeling. You don't need the happiness index to look out and thank your friends and thank your team and acknowledge them. You don't need technology for that. You just use that human stuff in the day-to-day.
And then finally, feel free to go for the shameless self-promotion if you want to. But what is the best technique, tool, or hack to use?
So I would use an employee engagement platform. You can use the happiness index. You can also use our competitors. But because I really, truly believe that understanding how your people feel before you make big decisions or do communications in your organization is emotional intelligence at scale. So I don't just want to shout out the happiness index. I want to shout out the whole industry, because I think it's really helping businesses be more humane. And if you've got that information to help you achieve emotional intelligence at scale, I think that's a great thing.
I love it. Once again, thank you, Matt, for participating in the podcast. That's Matt Phelan. You can find him at thehappinessindex.com. He's the co-founder and co-CEO of the Happiness Index tool there. And for more information on Sandler, you can go to sandler.com, check out our free resources. You can subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already, or send it to somebody that you think needs to hear it. Maybe you're a head of HR or a leadership position in your company. Thank you for listening. And remember, whatever you are, be a good one. The How to Succeed podcast is brought to you by Sandler, the worldwide leader in sales management and customer service training with over 200 locations. For more information, visit Sandler.com.
The Sandler Summit returns in 2023. Each new event builds exponentially upon the energy and success of the prior year. The 2022 Sandler Summit event was a huge success for everyone who attended, so don't miss the next one. Buy your tickets to the Sandler Summit at sandler.com/summit.